Hello, this is Miss Segan, and this is your Sunday lecture for the poetry mini unit we're doing this week. Just a little unit, 1 week. We'll come back, but I wanted to start with poetry and begin breaking down some of the barriers that it can present, and then to demystify it by getting you to write your own poem. So I'm really excited to see what you come up with this week. I'm calling it Adopt a Poem Week because there are 5 poems that I'm asking you to read, and there's a 6th one that's coming from the past, Sestina by Elizabeth Bishop. And you'll pick just one that you get to know a little more deeply this week. That will be the one that you, in the end, imitate. You try to create your own version of it, though your content and your subject will be your own. So that's the spirit of the week, and I'll get into how to do it. So here's my model poem, and actually I don't want you to pick this poem because I'm going to use it to explore some of the things that I want to talk about this week. It's by Charles Wright, and you read it, or you're going to read it. So here, I'll talk about it as if you have read it already. This is my inspiration for the unit title, The Language Will Never Speak, because of the last words of the poem here, the language that circles the earth and which will never speak. This, for me, is poetry. Poetry lives in this space where words fail. That will be the conclusion that I draw frequently for all of you whenever we're discussing poetry. I think a lot of art lives in that space. All art, perhaps. Poetry, though, has the unique task of using language to try to communicate something that is ineffable in language. Unlike dance, which is communicating the ineffability of something else with a different form, poetry tries to use the form itself that is befuddling the speaker, words. And it tries to craft something using words that might get closer at the heart of what is difficult about that subject. So when I give you the poems that I did this week, I tried to find ones that are interested in that. They're interested in the ineffable, the space where it is very difficult to say exactly what it is that the speaker wants to say. And I think if you're hearing this after reading the poems, you might go, oh yeah, that does sound like something that all of the poems had in common. So I'm beginning to already give you this main idea. I'll go back to Charles Wright in a second, that our poems are about the ineffable. Poetry lives in this space where words fail. Where do you see evidence of that in the poems for the week? Our 5 poets that you can choose follow. I want you to read them all and study them all, that this concept will deepen the more that you look at different versions of it. But you'll pick just one author who you'll study this week and eventually imitate, and I'll show you your choices. I should just pay some homage to Charles Wright. You can't pick him because I'm going to use him as a model, but here he is. I adore that poem. It's from a collection called Sestets, and you can see how he plays with the form sestets because it's 6 lines, but he's messing with alignment, and you can do that as a poet. He was somebody who I got to know at UVA when I went there because he taught at UVA. And he's won a ton of awards, and he also has this interest in semantics, in the way that our words can't really quite be translated because they themselves don't signify exactly what we believe. So if I say tree, my tree looks a lot different than the tree in your head. So even though we're both using the same word, we're not communicating about the same thing. So he's interested in that, which of course inspires his poem, and so many of the poems that I want you to think about this week. All right, but here are your choices. You can choose Waiting by William Carlos Williams. You can choose This Room and Everything in It by Li Young Lee. You can choose The Oven Bird by Robert Frost. You can choose How to Write a Poem in a Time of War by Joy Harjo. Or you can choose Elizabeth Bishop's Sestina, which was the multiple choice from 3 weeks ago. So I went through this quickly, but I'm giving you these slides. And whoever you choose, go to the slide that belongs to that author and read it and click on the links that I suggest, things that I think will help you as you try to make sense of that poem or the structure. So for example, this one, if you choose Sestina, you've got to do a sestina, and that's kind of challenging. It's very challenging. So you'll want to click on that link and just figure out what the form is. If you choose Harjo, for example, this video is where she explains what inspires the poem, and then she reads it out loud. So in each slide, I have some helpful little hint that I hope will help you as the week goes on. All right, so you take your poem, you take your poet, and you're going to conduct some creative analysis. As always, I'm going to root the creative analysis in some strand from the AP curriculum. The strand this week we're looking at is the 5th strand. There's 7 strands. The 5th strand is all about figurative language. This is what it looks like, 5A and 5B, which is our subject this week. 5A asks you to distinguish between the literal and figurative meanings of words and phrases. And 5B asks you to explain the function of those words and phrases. Both of these must be aimed at reading with a purpose, and so our purpose in this week will be, what is the message that these words and phrases try to communicate? As you read the poem, what are the words and phrases for? That will be the creative analysis assignment. I want to pause for a moment though and just look at the language of these standards with you. I write, first, how weird are these standards? Because they're very basic sounding. It's as if they say, read words and see what words mean. It's just a strange, vague application of something that we probably naturally do. So why is that in the AP Literature curriculum? I want to offer that we do this all the time. And if I told you to evaluate a word or a phrase from Good Country People, you would just dive in with gusto and you'd do it with success. Why do they make such a big deal of it here? I think when applied to poetry, this can actually freeze people up. The words in poetry can be more obscure, more mysterious, and we tend to second guess ourselves, saying things like, but is that what the author meant? Maybe they were referring to their time when they fought in the war, and we make these wild sort of leaps. We lose a bit of confidence in the text, in staying close to what's in front of us and conducting our analysis there. So we're going to try to do that. We're going to try to stay focused on our purpose. What is this for? What is this poem for? What is the message that it's trying to communicate? We're going to try to resist getting thrown off by the line endings of the poem. And we're going to just demystify the complex sentences that have these meandering antecedents and referents. And that's the grammar and craft assignment. Here is the creative analysis assignment. So your task, with the poem in front of you that you've picked, find a chain of words and phrases, that is, a line, that you believe unlocks the meaning of the poem. Copy it down at the top of your post. When I say a line, you can spill over. It's not restricted by space. You're choosing the words and phrases for themselves, and they can come from any section of the poem, and you can take as much or as little as you like. That's where line endings tend to throw us off, and we're going to ignore line endings. So you're taking a quote and putting it at the top of your post, and then I want you to explore, what does the line literally mean, and what does it figuratively mean? And then explain in your own words, what is the message that those words and phrases are trying to communicate? Because you picked a key line, because I asked you to pick one that unlocks the meaning of the poem, you should end up discussing the meaning of the poem just by trying to uncover what's below those words and phrases. All right, so that's the task. And we'll do this with my model poem with Charles Wright. So first, I said that we lose focus on our purpose. All right, let's reestablish that purpose. We are trying at all times to understand, what is the message of the poem? What is the main idea of the poem? Everything in the poem exists in service to this. It is the most important thing to take away at first. So when I first read that poem, what comes at me hard is this idea that we can't quite speak to one another. That's the main idea I get, which will never speak. So I already know I want to pick those lines at the end because he ends with that punchy sense of language. And that will be my answer to the purpose. What in the poem helps him communicate that perspective? All right, the line endings can throw us off. So here is what I'm asking you to do. You don't need to do this for creative analysis because you're just picking a piece of the poem for creative analysis. But eventually, for the grammar and craft portion of the assignment, you will just take away the line endings. Write down the poem as if it is a paragraph, or copy and paste it into your BGG, and then pull all of those line endings together. And so now what I have is just a beautiful piece of language that I am meant to analyze. I'm not focused on the line endings and what they might be telling me. I will be focused on that later, but right now, I'm just trying to understand, what is he saying? Yet again, I find myself drawn to those last words. That's as close as we can come to the language that circles the earth that you'll never speak. So I'm captivated by those words, and I think that the meaning of the poem is unlocked there. And then I want to make sure I understand the difference between the literal and then the figurative. So what is that? The literal meaning of the words is going to be just the dictionary definition. The words and phrases have a corresponding semantic value. It's very basic. What is that? What is that value? And then the figurative world, the world that we're in. So what does that mean? What are the connotations that come with the words? What are the ideas and emotions associated with the words and phrases? And that is where it'll be really natural for you in your creative analysis, if you wish, to use words like symbol and metaphor and simile and illusion, trying to understand the world behind those words. And they want us to be able to do both. So the words that I'm going to choose are like the end, as I said. This is going to be the grammar and craft assignment. I'll pause and let you see what I did here. You can absolutely pause this, wait to do the grammar and craft assignment first. I'll post that video separately, and then come back to this. It is my belief that in understanding the referents and the antecedents, you can unlock the poem even further. Now, you may also just keep going, make sense of the poem on your own terms, and then for the grammar and craft assignment, it'll just deepen your understanding of the poem. All right, but that in front of you was part of how I made sense of this poem. So what I get to at the end, I put it in bold here, is that the line to me means that tree, right, literally, it cannot be translated, not truly. One tree is not like another. The tree in my mind will never be the tree in your mind. That's the literal meaning there. But what is the figurative meaning? There is so much in our world we cannot explain to each other, and we cannot even explain it to ourselves. Words are constructions that can never quite capture the real thing. This is just a little taste. I think I would keep going with a few more sentences, but I wanted to give you the beginnings of what a creative analysis could be for this. And that is a creative analysis assignment. I hope it goes well. Again, go over and quickly check out that grammar and craft video if you are curious what I'm talking about, or you could just conduct this analysis first. Either way works.